A 7 and a 7.14.
Oh.
So as you can see here, Article 8, we have, this is a counter that essentially comes back with current contract language with some cleanup of 8.02, where it cleans up the language that is specific to 2017. But, you know, and we've talked about this pretty significantly during the work groups. And we feel like, you know, there are a lot of issues associated with the proposed language. We can go through and talk about that if there's a desire to do so. But what we have done is countered. So it's not as part of, so you have 8. And what we countered is part of 7. That's why we passed out 7. Okay. With the under, you know, because there's a reason for that is there's language that addresses this in that article, right? And that's specifically related to the time spent for ESE teachers during the year, having to do planning, having to do IEPs and other such paperwork, right? And so the proposed language would sort of bolt on to or be in addition to 7.14. All ESE teachers and speech language pathologists who are responsible for authoring IEPs, IAPs, or EPs will be provided 1 paid working administrative day each semester that's the school's in session to work on student plans, billing, and other necessary and related tasks. During this time, these teachers shall not be pulled for other duties such as supervision, class coverage, or testing administration unless in the case of an emergency. These administrative days cannot fall on teacher planning day. This work must be completed at the school site, cannot be used in the place of leave or to offset other hours worked. Each impacted teacher will work with their on-site administration within 10 days of the first day of the school year to set their schedule for the year. So what we're trying to do is provide for additional planning associated with those individual tasks, if you will, for all ESE teachers within the district. Trying to ensure that we did have, obviously had language that allowed for this, but it did not sort of require it. So there's consistency issues, right? So what we're saying is that each one of these teachers would be
just to share a little bit in how we came to this. We know that you guys spent a lot of time in Article 8, obviously with all the new language, and I did want you to know that we spent many hours, not just in our work groups, but internally going through each point. So it was not just a wasted effort. And so in lieu of just saying no, we tried to get to the core of what we thought that your concerns were, which was inadequate time. And so that's where we tried to come from in our counter response. Could I say something? Is that just about the concerns? I think I'll let them kind of take the lead on the content of this offer. I appreciate seeing something personally. Just with the summary of what was in Article 8 that we proposed. I just want to clarify that time component is only one small part of it. So what I just heard from you, Casey, was that was sort of your interpretation that the time was maybe the primary issue for us, but at the end of the day, that's part of it. But our primary concern is that we are not able to meet the needs of our ESE students currently. And like I said in the work group, we are not providing FAPE to the best of our ability. at the end of the day, that is our biggest concern. The time is certainly an issue too. So personally, I'm not speaking for the team at this point. I appreciate this effort. We'll see where it goes. But I just wanted to clarify that point as we continue this discussion.
Well, and as we went through and looked at every component of the proposal that you guys put forward, we really did strongly consider ways that we may be able to do this. And, and I think that short of, some pretty drastic changes within, to the way that we administer SLP and other ESE specialists within the district, looking at the current structure. Under the current structure, we didn't feel like we could accommodate the language that you want, right? We are trying to, will continue to look at options, but at this point in time, we didn't feel like, those options were far enough along that we could actually propose anything, right? We're not sure that we would want to do some of the things that have been put out on the table as potential solutions for the ESE specialists. And so, as it stands, this isn't an issue that we're just going to put to bed. This is an issue that we plan to work on. A lot of the things that you guys have brought forward in these two articles specifically are sort of deep-seated issues, that have been going on for a long time, that need to be addressed systematically or from a policy perspective in a much greater manner than we could do with the contract, right? And so, that being said, we do plan to continue to look for options, and we work with you guys on that front as we sort of formulate plans and whatnot associated with how we may be able to reduce class size and primarily case load. The class size for class size language was problematic for a lot of reasons that we discussed in the two work groups that we worked on in terms of how we go about setting class size, right? But the caseload piece was, even more difficult without making sort of systemic changes.
So because services was one of the things that was mentioned, I was taking that for her comment. Who's providing services on the days that people take these administrative leave days?
We would the thought process is that there would be subs put in place if appropriate. So and we recognize that in not every situation would a sub suffice, but primarily the self-contained classrooms, a sub could be put in place, and that's the primary cost to us that we're bearing is the replacement cost for those individuals during those days.
And just to know, SLP, OT, PT cannot get substitutes.
I know. So there's a carve out for SLPs. SLPs are sort of a special circumstance. The OTs, PTs, psychologists, all those folks, they already have Fridays, so they're allowed for planning. And so we essentially included SLPs so that they would receive the additional planning time, but of course recognize that a sub doesn't necessarily work.
It would probably be more proactive for service delivery about when to provide those services to work out.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Well, I think
Yeah.
We don't have time to
We're gonna
provide the
caucus.
service.
We'll talk about it in the
Yeah.
caucus.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, so do you guys want to you want to break and discuss your side of this language, and then we'll come back and or what do you want to deal with this? I mean, we're working through sort of a unique
Right.
situation here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm planning to caucus to talk about this right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Cool.
Thank you.
I started on that. I wanna make
Oh.
sure.
I'm opposite. Yeah, mindset, but-
Do you know the rest?
When we went to the nutrition conference, and they were having their. Did I say that right? Yes. And so it was at the convention center. And I love seeing.
You know everyone?
Every day, all the speaking greens. Yes. It's much more practical than nutrition.
I didn't think we, do you guys know everyone on our team?
And an ACD over here.
Not
We
everyone.
didn't do introductions because they were asking about some of yours.
Oh, sure, we can go around the room. I figured that,
I thought we did, but we didn't.
well, the last time that we've done, there's been like a whole room full of people.
Yeah.
So, you know, but if
We rock and roll, we keep going. All right.
Sorry. Are we on? All right. So we definitely appreciate getting a counter offer that wasn't CCL. So the main thing is that ESC caseload caps, regardless of what we agree to or not here, it's still a huge issue that has to be worked on. Can you describe to us, now what the plan is, I guess? Is there something in place? Are we working on something to actually reduce that? Because I think you said earlier, it's like not a foregone conclusion. We're going to keep, working on this stuff, but to what? To what?
Yeah, I think that on the whole, these are all sort of big issues that have been around for a long time. I think, Alan or Kathy, can you guys speak to sort of the long range plans or anything you guys may have in the hopper at all? I mean, we don't have I think the reality is we don't have a strategy at this point in time that is definitive. We recognize that there's an issue and we're trying to find solutions. And maybe Kathy can talk about some of those things that you thought about, but none of it has been set in stone or
Yeah.
anything like that.
And really, we need to be systematic in it because we all realize that caseloads are an issue and that's a staffing issue. But right now, there's nobody. Yeah. So it's kind of hand in hand with how we work that. And so we're definitely looking at workload caps as opposed to just purely caseload caps. And that takes more of a systematic approach to looking at what individual student needs are. And that's kind of the challenge in the whole ESC world is that we're talking about individual needs. So when we talk caseloads, we're talking purely numbers. When we're talking workloads, we're looking at the demands of the specific caseload at a particular school site, which may warrant different caps. And so we do need to look at that because we realize it's, I know just as a speech pathologist myself, looking at, you can look at salaries, but really it's your daily workload. And so we're definitely looking at that. We're doing some comps with some other districts and seeing how they handle that as well.
What other districts?
But the least testing are the Sons of Scandia and Alachua.
All right.
And of course, I would just tag on to that as well as we're having, as part of this negotiations, we talked about the ESE specialist supplement. Our proposal on compensation is to support that. Right. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think that may help us to be able to differentiate those individuals and be able to recruit more of those individuals, which will help with the money.
Well, I think part of it is recruit, but also that part is retain.
Right.
Because right now, just talking in one of the elementary schools yesterday, they've got 14 kids in a self-contained with the teacher, and we're talking toileting and individual assistants, and it's just unsustainable. But they can't hire anybody, but it's also creating working conditions where people are like, I'm about to bounce.
Right.
So at some point in time, sooner than later, whatever that conversation is and what that change is, because it's like chicken or egg, what comes first, right? So, I mean, we do know that there's critical shortage areas that the state identifies and that we as a district can, that we can additional monies go towards through those critical shortage areas. We don't have a list of critical shortage areas with any additional monies. Alabama just did a $20,000 increase for math and science to draw people to go there. You know, seeing that on Facebook and all that other fun stuff, because everyone's having a similar issue. So we're having to compete, not just here locally, but out surrounding counties and other states. And so the issue then becomes, what can we offer that another district can't offer that brings people to come here and want to stay here? And so that's where I think our shared concern and interest is, in getting to a point where we have that language and there's a target. Because I know, like, some of the language that's being cut out here, we never met for that committee. So the thing is, what is the shared plan known by all of, we're going to continue to work to get to a target by some date certain, so that we're not starting next year in a very similar situation.
So let me, and there's one of the Kathy mentioned it a little bit. What's difficult is it's hard to put a number on there, because as you know, every kid is an individual, right? So in my 11 years out here, the 9 years in the ESC under the shop, I get that call quite a bit. I said, well, I have 12 CBI, or I have 12 access, right? Or I have 5, or I have 6 Dr. Cots, and I need support out here. So what we've done in the past is we go 30 class, because that's getting into more. So because I've looked at classes of 6 kids that have 3 or 4 adults and said, what in the world? Until you go to the class. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Until you go to the class and see. I've seen 12 in a CPI, 13 CPI. We don't like 12's kind of what we work on. Very manageable. Manageable because of the need of child in class. Those reasons make it difficult to say, to come back to y'all and say, we're not going to let the 13 kid go in, or we're not going to let the 6 kid go in, those kind of things. I don't know how to ever solve it, because the nature of the beast with these kids is their individuality, what they need to make them successful.
So how does that apply to the push-in that the district is doing now with more students in the regular classrooms and the impact on those? Because the more that we do, same school situation last year, 2 push-ins completely changed the dynamics of the class, had to shut down the class for 30 minutes at a time to move kids out because of disruptive behaviors. It interrupted everybody else's learning. So when it comes down to it, we're not just looking just at ESE now, because every class is going to end up being it if we're going to be doing the push in the district. And so now it's impacting everybody. So that's something, as the transition goes, there has to be taken into consideration. Because
Well, and what we recognize too is that we do have students who are in every general ed classroom with this. And so we recognize also that some of these teachers are sitting there with students without supports. And what we're promoting is the systematic training and follow-up activities, coaching, mentoring, offering code planning time for these folks, so they're not cold having these kids come into their classrooms, because we've offered the trainings, but we can offer it and people come as they come. So we're offering these trainings, offering subs for folks to come to these trainings and work as a team. They started today. They started remote sessions on an overview today. Next week, they're doing co-teaching trainings that are offered for people to get a sub to cover their class and to get a stipend when they complete 12 hours with the company and that type of thing. So we recognize you can't just have these kids in their cold, but we also recognize, especially at the secondary level, you have some students that are pretty needy in your class, and they may only be scheduled to go to one ESC course, of learning strats or something like that. But these students are in the classroom, and we don't have the supports in there per se. And so when you're talking about these self-contained rooms, we are trying to start at the earlier level to really put the supports in place around them in the gen ed setting, so they don't get up to that middle school level and go out there and go, whoa, what's this? Okay. So that's where that push is. It's not just to say, oh, we can't support all these kids in the self-contained classroom. The premise of that is it's a basic human right that we're providing these resources and supports before you get to that point. Do we realize it's a continuum? Absolutely. We have to have a continuum. But that's where that push, if you want to call it that, comes from, because it is federal law and it's a human right issue that we address this. And we, like I said, we've offered training to the class, but we're trying to be very systematic and deliberate right now because we do have some money to be able to do this.
And for consideration at the school, there were ESC teachers that said that they're, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I got the number to like a level 3 of 523. Is that what's the numbering that goes there? Like
253 is the
250.
matrix.
Okay, so, but they were a 3, but they said they probably should be a 4. But I don't have time to do the paperwork and make annotations for the IEP because I'm doing 1,400 other things. So in terms of bringing more money into the district and making sure the students are getting their stuff, it goes back to, again, there's just too much going on to be able to address some of those things, which could eventually help, like in terms of getting more money because they've moved up the matrix ladder. So it's just something to, I don't know if you've heard it, but it was just one of the things that was shared with us by some of those folks. So, counter.
So, all right, we have a kind of counter prepared here. All right, so for Article 7, so we would accept if going up to, instead of, what does it say, 2 days, right? We would like to say 30 hours a year, so that'd be 4 days, and broken up in hours, so teachers take half days if they wanted. And that does not have to be on site. And one of the reasons for that is because in an effort, I guess, to save money or whatever, air conditioners get turned off pretty quickly after school ends. And so multiple teachers were like, I don't want to be forced to stay for an extra hour in an air conditioned building. In addition, we want to include OT, PT, and psych. And I know that I think the thought was to exclude them because they get these Friday planning days already. But the point is that none of them have enough time. And so they all need help. So it's great they're getting those. Probably all the others should get full Friday planning and would still need extra stuff. So we want to include them. And then instead of just the days, there's a real concern about when those admin days would actually happen. Because I hear, okay, we'll get subs, but they can't service the students really. And so we are proposing that it's, they can take those admin days or get paid out at their hourly rate, and that'll be up to the teacher to decide, and they'll plan that with their principal on site. And that is also, so that's the counter of what you provided for 7.14. The rest of the counter from 8 that we're trying to get the language to stick in is just from the first page. We want to keep A, C, and E. And I know you don't want any. It's 8.01, yep, A, C, E. And yeah, I mean, you've already said no to this language. It's important for, let's say, E, the amount of preps is, if you have more than that, is overwhelming. Teachers don't even be compensated for that. For C, my understanding is that there's essentially an open willingness to just disregard the law about that because C is just Florida state statute about class size requirements, but you just get fined for that, right? If you exceed them, and then you just pay the fine and move on. I think that's kind of the district's policy about that. Is that right? Or is there like a committee that actively seeks to lower all the class sizes? I've heard about that.
So the language he's saying for C, for those of you who don't have it in front of you, for classes tied to testing or progress monitoring, the class size shall be no more than 18 students in pre-kindergarten through 3, 22 students in grades 4 through 8, and 25 students in grades 9 through 12.
I think essentially what we're saying is that this contract isn't a place to document what our state requirements.
We have all kinds of state laws in this contract. So, I mean, it's additional protection. And, the problem is that, so I think my question was, are you following the state law? I mean, yes, because it says you just get fined if you exceed the class size, right? And then you pay the fine. So you're following the law because you pay a fine every year for exceeding class size.
We have traditionally have met the class size. Now, elementary level, we have been fine past couple. But for the most part, we make. Now, there was a year, y'all remember when they were class by class. I had that.
Does the teacher resource factor into that class, the class average?
It did at one time. I don't know about, I cannot sit here and tell you right now today if that's nothing. It allowed you to bump a little bit on the class size. For sure. it did.
My understanding of the research that I've done related to this is that they have to have students.
Resources.
They're tied to it.
Yeah, if they have, it's the teachers who have students actually tied to them.
In focus.
So you mean like, what do you mean by
That's-
Well, there's 172 teachers that are identified as teacher resource in Skyward right now.
Right.
So if there's 172
So you
teachers
mean
as
like a
teacher,
reading code?
So
I don't know, they're identified as teacher resource. So I don't know if they have students tied to them or not, but if they
if
are,
those individuals had students tied to them, then they factored in, is my understanding of how the math was done. Yes.
Right.
But if they don't have students tied to them, or if they're a dean or if they're, athletic director or something like that, then no, they don't count.
okay, so I guess the answer is we just don't know how many that is that impact the average.
Well,
Well, if
What I'm
they have
saying is they
students
don't-
assigned to them,
yeah.
then they're not impacting the average in any kind of way other
Right.
than they should be part of the
Right.
average because they have students.
and those that don't have,
But if I'm a teacher
Those that-
resource with 4 students, I really skew the average for the rest of the teachers that are at that site. So that's part of the concern of like, how many students are assigned to those teacher resources in calculating that.
yeah, but so in general, those individuals who have students tied to them, there is because they're teaching a class, right? And, it's not likely that they only have 2 or 3 or 4 students tied to them, right? We are totally excluding those individuals who don't have any students tied to them at all, which would really skew the numbers. So, right. So
So Chris, can you repeat the,
So it's A, class size shall be determined by the number of students physically in each class period. And then C,
A and C?
A, C,
and
and
B
E.
and
And
and then E is, I just talked about C. And then E is in a situation where teachers could have more than 3 preps, a stipend of $1,500 shall be provided for each individual prep. So, I mean, the problem with E is there's no money. We've committed the money that we have available for these types of issues to our compensation offer. If we had this money sitting around to be able to pay it, it would be in your compensation offer as it stands. I mean, we're not playing games as it relates to the compensation offer. We're trying to put everything we have on the table to you guys and give you the offer and the opportunity to respond to it.
Well, and I think meaning that would be a part of that
Right.
discussion with the compensation and not
Right.
separate.
Right, so our view is that we either want substantial language out of this, and this is part of it, with our counter as part of it, or additional money to compensate for that, but something has to give. I hear, there's not money, I think everyone knows my position on that. I saw in the board docs recently, I think there were a bunch of promotions, your position changed, for example, recently, right? And was there a funding increase with that? I think a lot of your positions did, right? For that, right? And so it's like, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money, there's money for this, there's money for that. We are usually not asking for $20 million.
Actually, no, there
looking-
wasn't. There was a change of a position. There wasn't just increased funding. It was related to Kim's departure.
Right, so that was kind of my next question.
Yeah.
So
Of
Kim,
which
so
there's
Kim
no-
left, right?
Right.
And
of
so you
which
have
there's
half-
no
There's a
current
technical-
person.
Yeah, so you have half of,
Technical definition, yeah.
you have half of the CFO salary left, half of an annual or a quarter of an annual, however much that is. Where's that going? To Naomi now, I guess. Where's her salary? There's lab salary there, right? I mean, and looking at the supplements that go around, there's tons of lab supplement money that's not being distributed to teachers and going to other people. there's a lot of money flowing around that I am deeply concerned about. That is not, I know Casey is shaking her head saying there's not money. Also looking at DSB and AFR that have come out, it's similar to previous years with over budgeting in the same categories we've been saying are over budgeting year after year. And so
the bottom line on it is that it's already in the contract language. It says in 8.02, teachers assigned primarily to traditional instruction shall have no more than 3 different preps.
Right.
It's there.
Or
So
what?
the language is repetitive. It's redundant.
It's not
You know?
because it adds the money. And so
We have no
let's,
funding.
okay, so we'll file agreements and take it to arbitration. You'll have to find the money for that, which exceeds at $1,500. So then what? Because that's what you're saying. You're saying the contract language is there. The part you're not saying is file agreements. And okay, you're gonna say what? Oh, they have 4 preps. Then what?
I think
Well,
you should
that's
include
what I'm
that.
not getting.
If you would like to include this as part of your compensation, then we should discuss it in that setting and we would allocate resources differently. I don't think we're necessarily saying, no, we're saying it doesn't belong in this section. We need to discuss it in terms of the total compensation.
We budgeted $6.63 million for compensation. And so if this is part of that, then we can definitely do a carve out, just like we've done for the ESC specialists. And others.
Right, but the idea is we want the language. If you're not gonna be able to accommodate the language, that cannot come at the cost of salaries for teachers and other benefits. You gotta keep her and find more money to come up with something in between all of this language and this stuff. And that difference is not millions and millions of dollars. I think it's a small enough amount of money that it is reasonable to add that in. So.
Well, in the previous discussions around this issue, there's a reason why the $1,500 is not ever, it's never contemplated. You know, so we've said we'll do our very best not to have more than 3 preps. In certain situations, as you can see in the language below that, there are circumstances where, you know, we do exceed 3 preps. And I think the problem right now with the language is that there's no definition for what constitutes a prep. And there's also no easy way to define it. Because I'll guarantee if I ask any 3 members of your team over there, or any 3 members of my team, they'll have a different definition for what a prep is.
So what are you suggesting still? So if one of them say I'm doing 4 preps, just file the grievance and we'll hash out and define what all that is.
Tell
Or,
me what violation of the contract we're, you know.
yeah, here where I have a teacher that has 4 preps. And so you're saying they can only have 3, right? Like you said, teacher assigned
So-
primarily traditional instruction should only have 3. They have
And
4.
in that circumstance, we would look at the situation and determine if they've actually got more preps than they're supposed to have and solve the issue. So, but what we're saying is it's not conducive to success for you guys just to file all these grievances. Come talk to us about when those situations are
Right.
there.
It's,
And from a labor perspective, we'll go to, if I was to go to Benny Golden.
I'll have them back on my camera before.
Stop, he's 40.
I would go to Benny Golden and say, you know, we've got an issue.
Gonna make a
They're saying
note.
They got more than 3 preps. Let's solve the issue.
but I think
Well,
to
the
our
issue is
point,
to hire more teachers.
issue
You
is there's
can't.
not enough teachers. And so that some teachers are teaching so many different things. They have 4 or 5 preps. You're going to talk to Dr. Golden and say, how are we going to figure it out? And I'm sure he's going to say, more teachers.
Right.
And then you're all going to say, oh, we can't hire them. There's not enough money for that. And then so we proceed to the arbitration, which costs much more than the 50. I mean, that's what I'm struggling to understand the end of this. If I can see the end and understand how it fleshes out, that's easy. Right now, it's just an arbitration that I don't get that.
And does LCS, if you're determining what the preps are, don't you have a definition of the preps? How do you know if you don't already have a preconceived definition of what a prep is? I'm not.
Well, I mean, we'll be happy to set the definition for a prep.
I'm just saying, what do you use if someone says they have?
If you guys accept that definition, we'll be happy to define it right
But,
now.
Certainly
but I
bargain
think
it.
what she's asking is,
What I'm
as
asking
site
is-
administrators, how are they, when they develop the schedule, being instructed from Leon County Schools to interpret a prep? We're not asking you to define it for us. What is being communicated to leadership at the sites that say, when you do your scheduling, this is what a prep is, don't give more than 3. So what is that guidance?
We can talk to that. We'll speak to that. I think that
Okay.
to this end, I mean, what we need to do is hear your entire counter, right? And I think we would all agree since May, we've talked about the money that we have available. It's the same.
What if I said?
It's the same. And
But-
so to go back and forth.
Yeah.
about whether or
Available
not
and
that the money
allocated are
is-
two different things.
So the bottom line is, that's what we have to offer, right? And we can, if we continue to argue this point, and argue this point, and argue this point, then unfortunately, I think that we may not be able to solve it as part of it.
We don't have, we can keep negotiating the language. The
Well, I'm
idea
fine with
is
it. Yeah, that's
if-
what we're looking for.
Yeah, but that to me seems that there's less of a resolution possible than coming up with a little extra money, is what I'm saying.
But we,
And so whatever the board wants to do, I don't know. I hear they've only approved 6.6 is what you're saying. How much longer does this drag out? To what extent that they're like, give them 6.9 or whatever, if they'll close it, I don't know. But the point is, something's got to give. It can't just be the 6.6 and a little, for some people, this covers some people, but not the remainder. That's the issue.
I'd like to hear the rest of the proposal, but the bottom line on the number is that when we got extra money from the state, we changed our proposal to 6.6 from 6.1, right? And really, that's just a different allocation of the money from the state. So what we have to say is 6.6 is our cap. And that point blank, that's our cap. $6.63 million is where we're at. And so,
I think that's it.
So they can I go back and verify about on
The
Article
7,
7?
yeah.
Okay, so the counter was 30 hours and to use hours rather than days.
Per year.
Per year, right, per school year. That we remove the provision that it be conducted on site.
Yep.
That we include OTPT in site.
Yep.
And that the teacher can trade out their hourly rate for the hours, was that?
Yeah.
That
because
was the
if-
one I didn't.
Yeah,
make.
no, exactly. So it's that they can get the coverage as you described here, or just take it paid at their hourly rate, these 30 hours. The idea is that if they're like, I gotta service these kids, I'm not dealing with the sub coverage, I'll do the work, just pay me to do the extra work, and you're gonna have to pay the subs anyway. This is what we think is fair for that. And did you call any other districts to get this language, by the way? Like, was presented to me in another district almost identically, so I was very surprised. But the difference was they did allow the payout in that
No.
district. So,
Yeah, was it
original
not?
language.
It
All
is.
right.
Yeah,
So that tells me y'all went to a conference and learned something. All right. Great.
Doppelganger.
But yeah, that was the main thing was that payout was a big difference. Right? And then the AC and E was the other
Right,
part of
the
our
AC.
counter. But that, yeah, so that is the counter for this stuff.
So do we want to talk about the counter for the other, or we just focus on?
Other counter.
For 10?
we have a.
We have it?
Yeah,
we have-
Okay,
I
sorry, sorry, I forgot.
I'm like-
Sorry.
We're gonna talk about this.
Okay.
And we copy it.
You
Please.
may.
I got too many papers.
Yeah,
From different states.
All right, thank you.
Be back.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
Yeah.
for being patient. We appreciate it.
Sure.
So we're gonna start with the conversation around the preps. Okay. And so with that, I'm gonna have Scott and Anisha from school management talk about our interpretation of the prep language. Okay. So,
Wait, there is language around prep?
well, no, the
Current
current
contract.
contract.
Okay.
Where it says teachers assigned primarily to traditional instruction shall have no more than 3 different course preparations. Okay,
And then continue.
and so you guys asked us what our district interpretation of the prep was. And so that's what we're gonna talk about.
Traditional is basically only math, science, social studies, and language arts.
Okay, hold on, wait, traditional
Traditional,
Four classes.
core.
Yeah.
Traditional,
traditional instruction.
all right. We get it a prep. in Biology, I guess is an example. Biology 1, biology No, you're fine.
that's-
All right, now put one prep by biology, general, and two by AP five. That's two preps. Okay. Your standards at test. Right, gifted would also be with general and others.
What's the rationale for putting three things in one?
This is
Standard
showing
is
you
the
that the
same.
standards are all the same for that group.
Regardless of the honors, the gifted or the gen, the standards are the same in those biology courses. When it does get to AP, the standards is changed.
Yeah, there's a different standard for AP. Okay.
And, you know, I think that as we go back into the language, it's obviously clearly not defined, but this is the rationale that we have utilized. And of course, you know, by all means, we're not looking for you guys to file grievances related to the current contract language that's been in place. What we would like is if you have issues where, you know that this is a teacher's being asked to do more than three preps as they've been defined here, then let's have a conversation and we'll talk with the principals and try and figure out ways to solve those issues.
How does this apply with electives?
It doesn't apply to
The contract language doesn't apply to elections.
Right, so those teachers could have 6 preps.
Yes. That was the next one, it says, in delivery models such as PPG, Rise, Rider, area.
It also doesn't apply to elementary schools. According to the current contract.
Yeah. So the self-contained ESC, EBD, K through 5, that teachers isn't covered, but they are doing core curriculum areas for K through 5. 6 different grade levels, different subjects, different standards. So that individual, too bad, so sad, based off the language right now, right?
The language that both sides has been working with for years.
Well,
But then
8.03
for saying it's
not
refers
okay.
to elementary, whereas 8.02 is high and middle.
It's only special area in 8.3. Elementary.
Oh, I'm
art.
sorry, yes, and then 8.04.
They still speak to the prep though.
Well, traditionally, elementary school teachers, they cover multiple subjects. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say traditionally they're taking advantage of, but yeah.
No.
So, I mean, conservatively.
But, well, the example you just gave was ESE resource teachers who are having to prep for 6 different grade levels potentially.
And the
Or
subject.
the separate set.
And separate subjects.
And the special area too, I mean, I think that's addressed in 8.03, but our special area have K through 5 that they're prepping for.
Yeah.
And that takes a considerable amount of time and they don't feel like they have adequate planning time. to do that.
But that is. Okay, I'll put it out there. I'm 46 years old. You know, I was in elementary school.
Whoa.
I was in elementary school 40 years ago. And it was the same way that my elementary school teachers covered multiple areas. I mean, that's what the job has always been. I mean, it's.
Are the demands the same now if they work 40 hours?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's obviously things change over time, but I mean, the bottom line is, this is, when you define the role of a teacher, I think that we have switched to becoming a little bit more specialized in a lot of instances. And I would argue in those instances, those teachers have fewer preps now than they did, when many years ago. So, I mean, we've always had elementary. That's part of the carve out for elementary, right? That's why when you talk about the 3 preps and all that, it's sort of an understanding that there's always been this, it's a general approach to the subjects within elementary. I'm not saying that it's obviously it's a hard model, but it's one that's well established.
So I think one of the reasons why we came into play was, I understand when you say a traditional course is a core subject area. And then there's a lot of things that fall under, right? A chorus teacher has multiple preps because they teach multiple levels of chorus, right? And then there's only generally one of them at the school site. But in some of our other classes, electives, vocational, last year I had 5 different preps of 5 entirely different classes. I mean, they each had a different state standard, they each had a different thing that they needed, and so on and so forth. And those teachers, when there's not somebody else to supplement off of, chorus, maybe band, construction, and you're prepping because there's no one else there to split the workload with, that's when it becomes difficult when you have the more than 3 preps. Because the reason I had so many preps in the last 2 years is because we lost a teacher, she retired, and we did not rehire her. So I took on her workload, which was out of my original wheelhouse when I was hired. And so those kinds of things are happening, right, where teachers are retiring and we're not reappointing teachers into their spot, maybe because the course is maybe getting phased out or restructured, but it's changing those workloads where the stipend could go far to help say, hey, we understand that now that there's an increased workload compared to what we originally started with, because there are 3 preps, they are 3 significantly different courses. It's not biology all day long, which is the same general core to it, just different levels and intensities. I mean, these are in a vocational world, different classes entirely. I mean, it's like, you know, Word to business entrepreneurs to OJT to, you know, all those different levels, and the dual enrollment sections too. We're happy. I mean, that's just kind of what's going on. Speak to that.
Understand?
You're correct.
Yeah.
The way around.
I don't disagree with you at all.
You're right about that.
I get that.
All right, so my question is, how do we get her down to 3 preps? Because she just said
We
we're
don't need
missing a
to,
teacher.
the contract language doesn't apply.
Then we're
That's
limiting,
right.
Now we're gonna do that.
then we're limiting student choices. We're here for students.
And that.
That's just,
So should we
that's to
just-
try to make it that we're
But that's
not.
what we-
So, but I
that
mean,
is
that's
if we
just not a
say-
really nice comment to put out there while we're trying to deal with all
We
this.
would be limiting it.
I mean, it's like saying it's what's best for kids. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all here because of the kids. That is not the issue right now. The issue is identifying someone that has additional workload, and whether or not it reflects in the contract right now, that's the reason for the suggestion for the additional stipend for those preps in those areas. So it's just trying to solve an issue that maybe was not recognized 30 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, but today it's the topic. You know, just the same with elementary. Lesson plans used to fit in a square about this big in a piece of paper. Now we've got our teachers in elementary doing 7 pages for a day. Okay, so it's not the same workload in terms of what a lesson plan looks like and what we're asking folks to do, but so to compare the time difference and what once was and where it is, we really just want to focus on where we are and what kind of language we need to kind of show respect for the time and energy that's going into it. Because if I can put my lesson plans here, then that frees up a lot of other time to deal with all the other things that I need to deal with.
And so, not that notwithstanding, where would the money come from? So how would you even begin to budget for this?
So you guys have
So, I
to tell
mean,
us that, because
And so the bottom line is, it would be a significant change to our budget. It would be a significant change to the way that we operate. And it would have it, and so if you guys want to include this as a carve out in your teacher compensation package, let's talk about that.
in
But there's
21,
not additional funds that are available to pay this stipend.
in 2020-21 school year, you budgeted 314 million to run the school district. You spent 272. So you over budgeted by $42 million. I would love for 10% of that flow to teachers that over budgeting. That'd be great. And then this last year, the budget was 317 million. You ended up spending 280. So 37 million over again.
Address this
Year
in
over year over year.
public
Yeah. But it's,
numerous occasions. It's just not true. Okay.
it's what you
Go
filed
back
with the
and watch the board.
DOE.
Go back and watch the board meeting from 2 or 3 times ago where Naomi and Kim and everyone sat down and they addressed this issue specifically.
Yeah, I was at the workshop for that and I asked him beforehand, please send me the documents for that. She said it's posted on the board website and then gave additional documents to the board that we were not provided. I also told her if she can go back in any of these years and show a single number of mine was wrong, I would yield the whole thing. She said, no, I'm only looking in the future. And I said, well, that's fine. When I get your AFR, I guess that's the future since we didn't have it yet. Here we are again with this over budgeting, underspending. I know you gave the presentation at the public school board meeting. You're one of the only districts in the state that regularly has over budgeting like this of tens of millions of dollars. And again, you keep saying that's wrong. It's your reports to the DOE. It's your district summary budget. You submitted the DOE. I pulled it from their website. It's what is the analysis in every district. And then you submit the AFR.
I mean, I just don't understand this continuous argument going back and forth. We've given you our answer on this.
Yeah, well, you just said, how do we budget that? Where does it come from? So I gave you my answer on it. I don't know, you over budget by 40 million, over budget another million. I don't know.
$6.63 million has been put on the table by the board for teacher compensation. And, you know, I mean, it's possible that this $1,500 supplement could add up to more than $1 million easily.
That's right.
You know, so where does that come from?
So you're saying that when you submit a district summary budget and then reconcile that with the AFR at the end of the year, people should just ignore those numbers. They don't mean anything.
Chris,
Because
this
that's
is
what I'm
an
reporting.
unproductive course of discussion.
I know that.
So, okay, well then let's move on to something that can be more
Sure.
productive.
Okay.
Because I think that there are things that we could have more productive conversation on if we move
I
forward.
agree. He asked me where.
Because
where to get
you
the money.
refuse to accept our answer as the truth.
It doesn't make it any less true. It's just,
Do you think I have the same opinion of that? That if you refuse to understand the money submitted to the DOE and that this analysis happens in 62 other districts and without this kind of obscure pushback, why does it not work in this one? And does the DOE know that all these numbers, just ignore them? That's what I don't get, because they've said submit these reports and then they use this for every district in the state. Not Leon, though. We can't apply that here. There's all these special caveats that doesn't work here. I don't get that.
again, do we want to move forward in a
No,
productive
we
way?
can, we can, yeah, we can move on to what, Article 10 or something?
Show me a district that where they're giving $21 million to their teachers. I mean, our offer is a very fair offer. It's a very fair offer. $6.6 million. It's a very fair offer. And you have teachers out there that are who are waiting to be paid because you guys are convinced that we're lying about this money. When we can agree and get them paid next month.
Right.
Agree. It's $6.6 million is a very fair offer.
I don't think we're convinced that you're lying. I think we're trying to get everything to match up. I mean, if one thing is saying one thing and you're saying something else, I think the question on the table is, why is there a difference, and show us the document.
Well, I think what we've done is and respectful. We've made presentations to the board in public that address the concerns. And then the very next day, you want us to do it again. We've already answered the question. We've already done it.
Well, and I think that there's a difference in interpretation of some of the data that is, at this point, doesn't feel like we can overcome. But perhaps if we moved on to Article 8, we could.
Well, I guess, was there a
We're on
comment
8 right
to
now. Well, there's
seven?
more, there's
Okay.
more parts.
That's
There's
what I'm
more
just trying to
parts
make
of
sure.
where we're at.
Okay.
We keep getting,
Article 7/8.
To
So
your
we
point,
talked
Casey,
about-
though, I'm trying not to get into the reason I'm quoting these numbers is because I could quote lots of more detailed numbers, specific budgets. To your point is maybe we're going to disagree about all that. But the annual DSB and AFR should be pretty agreeable numbers report to DOE. That's why I just said those. So how we still disagree on them, I'm not exactly sure.
I think in a general sense, we can all agree there's a fundamental disagreement in the interpretation of the budget numbers. And I think just focusing on some of the language, which is what we were here today to discuss, and making some positive momentum would be a more productive use of all of our time.
Sure.
absolutely. So so going back to the language for aid, unfortunately, we're just not able to accept A, C, or E. We cannot do that. However, we are willing to make adjustments to 7.14 in the following manner. Okay, we're willing to offer 4 days, 1 per 9 weeks. Okay. This is the equivalent of the 30 hours, but we just do not feel like operationally splitting them up into hours is going to be conducive to success for the district, because many of these individuals are going to have to get subs. And going from having to get, if you split a day in half, and I know, the way that it's proposed, it could go even further than that, but if you're just splitting it in a day and a half, then that goes from having to get one sub on one day to having to get 2 subs on 2 separate days. And it is even more exacerbated if you start breaking it down further. So 4 days, 1 per 9 weeks is something that we feel like is very fair. We do feel like it is essential that it be completed on site. We've offered.
But we'll make sure that the
numerous-
AC is on.
Yes, we'll make sure that AC is on. We've offered.
That's gonna
numerous
cost money,
companies.
so.
Well, hopefully it should be
And
during the school day.
The other adjustment would be that, instead of having to set these days within the first day of the school year, we just would require 10 days notice instead of setting everything in the year. And
Thank
then, and we're fine with including these days for the ESC specialists.
10 days notice to take the planning day.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 10 days, yeah, 10 days. It's right. That's a very good point. Yeah, thank you. That's pretty.
Repeat it again.
So that they would do their request 10 days in advance, but so the site, it is an agreeable thing. So if the site has conflicts on the days in question, they can't just say, I'm gonna do it on this day.
They're requesting it.
They're requesting.
So instead of
it.
a 10-day notice,
And we'll
it's a
make
10-day
it-
request.
Yes.
Like what?
And we're gonna
Needing
do our
approval
very
from
best
the
to make
site
sure
admin.
that we do. It's just like, okay, but if you have problems with testing administration, is if they've got tests on that day,
Right.
and we need all hands on deck, that'll be a day that we can't approve it. But generally speaking, what the principal is asking is that we would be given the opportunity to approve those with only 10 days notice.
Essentially, it's the same as this last sentence, except within 10 days of the first day of school, it would be 10 days prior to the planned administrative workday. So
Yeah.
And they can work together and adjust that.
And I think that's where, there's always gonna be something.
So, yeah.
So does that, yeah,
Every day is its own adventure.
so you're declining the payout at all? for them?
Yes.
yes.
So, but you just described operationally the sub stuff, so if you pay them out, then there's no subs even need to be
I can speak
covered.
to this. So at the very least, it comes down to, it's a financial commitment. When we originally contemplated this, we were looking at, okay, what can we afford? Because we're looking at potentially more, right? But the bottom line of it is that all of these things have a cost. And so as it stands, we feel like, the subs make $15 an hour at this point in time. The minimum for a teacher is at least $29.50, or right in that net. So they're at least twice as expensive, and most of the times they're 3 times as expensive, right? So, the bottom line on it is we do not feel that from a financial perspective, paying it out is going to be something that we can do.
At their hourly
At their
rate.
hourly rate. So we could potentially talk about some other stipend or something like that that is a commensurate amount with the amount that's paid to the sub, but the reality there is that we just can't afford to even come anywhere close to what the teacher's hourly rate is.
Did you cost this out, what that would cost for the teacher's hourly rate? For this amount?
for 4 days, it was gonna be about $135,000.
No, that was at the
At the
sub
sub
hourly
pay.
rate.
So about,
So we made some
280.
very like loose napkin math while we were caucusing based on your counter,
Sorry.
but no, we had costed at the sub rate before we came.
Yeah, I
we
thought
would
that's what you were
expect it to
asking.
be like 270, 300 with, because I would double it. to your
Well,
comment, and then
Or
add
at least.
more.
Actually, I think it would be closer to like 335 if we doubled it,
If we
because we had looked at differing amounts of days that we could offer when we originally prepared the counter.
And the problem right now, I mean, so,
And that's assuming it was just at the base rate,
right.
right? Because it would just be a double,
Right.
right?
I mean, as it was proposed, we felt like this was something that we could afford to do. You know, and I think that going to 4 days, we feel like we can still afford to do that.
In addition to the compensation offer.
My suggestion is share the discipline and we can counter on the discipline as well as whatever we have here. I mean, if we're gonna, for the purposes of time.
We're-
if we wanna do that, or What
So
time do you guys want?
It's
lunch?
11:26 right now. We're gonna go ahead and go to, I would propose that we go ahead and go to lunch. now.
20 minutes.
We're gonna do an hour.
Oh,
And then we're gonna come back and we'll do discipline.
If you give us discipline, we can actually talk through whatever it is.
Yeah, if you wanna
And
hand
that's
it
why
to-
I was just saying, for
give
the
it
sake
to
of
us and then we
time.
can,
We can
I
do.
have,
we
what
can
time
do-
is it? It's like hard 2 o'clock. I have to leave to bargain somewhere else. So I can't stay later.
Oh,
You
you
have,
have,
where's the
I
handouts?
bargain every day.
It's 10, here it is. All right. What time do you say? I mean, That's
That's what we scheduled, yeah.
I just wasn't.
I'm just saying, if I wasn't bargaining somewhere else, I potentially would stay an hour or whatever.
it's a hard time. It's a hard two.
We can, you guys would rather do 45 minutes, we'll do that, but I think an hour would be fair. Especially since you
Give
guys have.
every lunch, so you'd have to ask that.
Sorry?
What they want.
45? Let's, 45. Let's go. Yeah, let's go now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna
Oh,
get
I
that to
see.
you, we're gonna get it to you to review.
They're saying lunch is about to get crazy as college kids are getting off their period, so we gotta go to not stand in line.
Yeah.
And you guys can review that during lunch if you like, and then thanks. We come back and talk about it. Thank you.
Where's the
Okay, and then I'll meet
Where we stop? We're still recording.
All right, so big picture. Big picture is we 100% recognize, after having gone through the work groups, and of course, just every one of us sees on a day-to-day basis that student discipline is an issue, right? Wallace can provide some insight on some of the data that's out there as well. I want to talk in just a second, but the data tells us that, right? That there is a big issue out there as it relates to student discipline. But what we don't have is the silver bullet to fix it, right? And that's something that we as a district have got to work on, right? And that means developing an approach that goes beyond what we can do in this contract, right? And I think that we're not adverse. Obviously, we're not adverse to having contract language, but at the same point in time, as we develop this approach to discipline, we need to have the flexibility to put in place a policy that makes sense. I'll let Walt talk a little bit about the.
Right. Just to reemphasize the point that Brett just made, we understand, we see it, it's all over the news cycles in media. So we know discipline now is an issue, not just in Leon County, but everywhere at this point. And getting to a place where we can address those discipline concerns, we want to also maintain perspective and also address the issue in an equitable way. And we know that that conversation includes the teachers. It also includes community members. We've already started conversations as it relates to those types of things. And we know we will be partnering with this group moving forward. But we do see that most of those opportunities are going to come with changes in policy and our approach and how those things are managed at our site. Understanding too that there is a need for the consistency and to create a working environment for teachers that is conducive. So you can do your job because you didn't get in this profession just to manage behaviors all day. And we see those challenges, but we want to do that and also balance that with the equity challenges and those other things that come along with enforcing a discipline plan or policy.
And so what we've proposed is the language that we feel like we can agree to now. I mean, a lot of what you propose makes sense, right? And so these are the things that we feel like we can agree to now, and in the future, when we have our revised policy, we're open to having a reopener around this issue. But you know, we all know that when we agree to contract language, that language really guides us for the future, right? What we're saying is that we need to have the flexibility at this point in time to make a policy that makes sense without being tied to language that may or may not align with where that policy takes us, right? So what we're able to agree to now, and so, excuse me, to supplement the language that we already have, we feel like gets to a lot of the things that you're looking for. It's an extension of an olive branch, if you will, to prove to you guys that we do care about this issue and we do care about what you have to say as it relates to this subject, but that it's an ongoing concern, and that as that policy comes out, we'll work with you on the policy. And then if it has an impact on this book, then we'll be willing to do a reopener on this issue to discuss it at that point. All right, so I'll go through the language and we can sort of speak to the intent. Casey's going to help me with the speaking to the intent of the language. All right, so going back to the beginning, 10.05 classroom discipline and control. The district agrees to give support and assistance to employees with respect to control and discipline in the classroom. The district additionally agrees to provide a written statement governing the use of punishment of students to all employees not later than the first week of each school year. That's current existing contracts. And it really got at a lot of the things that you guys were sort of reiterating in the lower language. We're striking in keeping with those guidelines, an employee may impose customary classroom discipline where necessary because we're pushing it down. Employees may use force as is necessary in protection from attack or to prevent injury to another student or employee in accordance with state law. That's existing language we added in accordance with state law because that's something that it's not really, it's already laid out for them. All right. A, instructional personnel may take the following actions in accordance with district policy and any school-specific behavioral management guidelines. All right,
I want to add here that we did add the district policy and school-specific, but other than that, the strikes in here are more just to make it more concise. Took out some of the fluffier stuff about, for the safety of all students. We agree it's for the safety of all students and the order of the classroom, but we just made it more concise, just to, yeah.
Okay, so then, it is, we feel like the language in accordance with district policy and school-specific behavior is essential to this situation. We have to, we can't have individual teachers that are creating rules and policies that are not in alignment with district policy, right? So I mean, that's a no-brainer to us. But then, so go to A, may implement classroom rules of conduct. B, may assist in enforcing school rules on school property during school-sponsored transportation and during school-sponsored activities. C, they may request and receive timely assistance in the classroom, in classroom management and in the case of an emergency. D, they may request and receive training and other assistance to improve skills in classroom management, violence prevention, and conflict resolution and related areas.
We'll make it 1, 2, 3, 4.
We are,
Yeah.
yes, I was gonna speak to that. We're not gonna
Yeah.
have A, B, and C. as a-
Right.
So that was.
I know who did that.
Typographical.
And then B is, student discipline shall be addressed by site administrators within a reasonable time frame. We definitely agree with the intent behind your language, but just within 24 hours is just there's too many variables out there that to confine us to the 24-hour time frame. But
Correct. If I
yes,
can speak to that. So like for us, with our law program, a kid can have an infraction. They can hire an attorney on campus. We go into a step. So administration does not process because we get them involved in the discipline process. So it won't happen within that 24 hours. So you will cripple my programs doing that where kids does have a voice in order to be a part of that process. So I just want to give you that as an example on why that 24-hour won't work.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yeah.
It doesn't say resolved within 24
I got
hours.
you. I
It
just wanted to
says
make
addressed.
sure that-
So the intent is that it begins the process within 24 hours.
Absolutely.
So the point is, it's not necessarily this solution. So a student goes down to the office, hits a teacher, right? Whatever, goes down to the office. Well, there should be some action taken within 24 hours that is then communicated to the teacher of record that is a part of this. And that's what we're saying is like something should be done, not necessarily that there is an endpoint that is resolved at that point. So that's where I think when we're talking about what the intent is, like the idea of what is a reasonable time frame, whose reasonable definition? What is that? Like, is it a month, week, couple hours? Like, there's absolutely
Depends on how many
no-
staff members are on
Someone's
the staff.
never-
like-
There's never really a
standard.
definition of
Right.
reasonable.
Reasonable person.
I mean,
Right.
like even in the public records law where courts have addressed public records.
25 days.
And that
Case law is
needs to be
concerned,
reasonable.
exactly. Case law has determined.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
I know, but no, would if a student punched a teacher or another kid in the face, is a month reasonable? I would say no, a month is not reasonable.
even if we go back to something that happens, say something happens on a Friday afternoon.
Right.
And it's observed, but that student goes home, can't be found. 3 days passes, or 2 days passes, Monday morning, the kid shows up to school and it's addressed. Well, at that point in time, we violated that 24-hour standard.
Not
But what
necessarily
we're at-
if you're
what we're
talking
at
about
is
working days.
reasonable. Well, it's not, but it's not days, it's 24 hours. So it means that's the
So
issue.
work
So what we're trying to say is
Within 2 work days.
we want it to, it has to be somewhat flexible. We get what you're getting at. It can't just be pushed off. It can't be kicked down the road. You know, there has to be a response, but that response isn't always finite.
Okay, so in terms of the discipline, I think for some folks, you go ahead and finish. You
Okay.
finish first. Go ahead. Sorry. We'll
So
get that.
C, referral shall not be written under another bargaining unit employee's name. So that simply means, you know, that if we're making adjustments or if we're writing a referral on behalf of someone else, that those changes will be notated in the referral. So like, You know, if Kim was to write a referral and I was her administrator and I needed to strike the names of the other kids involved because it's the referrals going to be shared with the parent, right? Then I, as the administrator, could strike it, but I would make a note that I struck those names, you know, that change was made by me as the administrator and not just done as if I was Kim. I think that is a very reasonable request on the part of the union that we wouldn't reflect that you wrote something that you did not write, right?
Or
include something.
delete it.
Or delete it, yeah, right. So if we deleted it, we would make a note that we took something out, right? But
It's not on.
Yeah,
no, oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
because once
It
it's
doesn't
created,
say
it's a
that.
public record and it can't be destroyed.
Right. Well, I mean, we're not looking at, really, I wasn't saying delete the whole copy. I'm saying that if Scott Mazur's name was in there, and that would be a violation of your privacy.
Yeah, for purpose, so we got to remove the
We
student's
removed
name.
his
Of course,
name,
understood.
right? That's what we delete part of it. We would note that we made it, that, you know, Anisha Robinson made it an adjustment to this referral. Right.
This is when referrals are not public. We're not allowed to share that. Can't share that.
I think you can't share the student's name, but if I wanted to make a public record request for all the referrals written in LCS properly redacted, what
You
restriction?
get
is
all
there?
corrected, we redacted
Yeah.
that. I'm saying
Right.
as far as,
So
But
it's
that
public
means that
record.
it's still public record.
what's an example? I would say.
Well, with some data having an exception.
I think that what we're saying to you is that we're not, if the intent is to pick nits and, you know, go through this. Whatever, however you want to say it.
Picnic. We'll do a picnic
We all
too.
just pick nits or nitpick, whatever it is, right?
But, all right, so, but to your point, I hear your point. It sounds like what Denny was saying would still qualify under the 24-hour thing because you're dealing.
still
with
addressing it.
So you don't like the idea of reasonable for exactly what we're discussing. What about 48 hours or something like, or work, or like 2 work days, or so that your Friday, Monday example's taken care of.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we are not agreeable to defining a time frame because we feel like reasonable applies to all circumstances.
So then how does that
But that's
improve the current
subjective.
situation?
Your reasonable is gonna be different from somebody
How
else.
is it just, you're just putting that in there to just put it in there, but it's.
Well,
Does
can
it
you
make
give
a
us,
change
can you
to-
give me examples of times whenever these types of situations are being ignored and not addressed? Because if you brought those things forward, they
Yes,
would be addressed.
we have it the
How
previous
much time
table.
do we have?
Yeah.
So, but go ahead, help Martin.
I mean, even if it's something dealing with attendance issues, something like that, that's just something simple.
Right, but so
If-
a non-emergency discipline, okay, sorry.
But what it is, okay, so let's say the student keeps coming tardy.
Yeah.
But they're keeping, if they keep interrupting class time. So the referral's written, but it's not handled for 2-3 weeks because you manpower staff in the office that handles it. But that's not, but the kid is still coming tardy. Every day it's interrupting the class because, and so like, it gets handled eventually, but at that point, it doesn't even make sense.
But from an operational perspective, I think that is
That's reasonable.
another, I know, but that's a non-emergent
Yeah,
issue.
but that-
There's
I
no
just
real
think-
problem associated
We
with
used
addressing
to-
that thing in a week.
I didn't pick something out that.
You're saying something that's not reasonable.
No,
Listen,
What I
wait.
was saying is.
So
that's
inside of a
reasonable under the
classroom, when
circumstances.
one person walks into a room, okay? And I know that because you haven't taught, but there are a lot of people in here who have. A student walks in
Not taught
tardy,
students, but
okay? Walks in
Adult.
and it's disruptive, okay? And you comment and you write it up, and you write it up, and you write it up. There's got to be a point where you're holding that student accountable.
And I'm gonna piggyback on what you just said. You're talking more transition between classes, right? Not just coming to school late. Yeah, there's a.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would kind of help.
Yeah,
Right,
so we're
yeah.
talking about like an in-between.
Yeah, not like they're,
For some reason, it's
Yeah.
gotten lost between second and third period. Can't find their way, and now they wander in, but then they can't find their way every day to second and third period, right? So they start getting the accumulated absences kind of scenario going on. And part of the reason why the referral is written is to additionally identify that the student is wandering around campus willy-nilly between second and third, unsupervised between second and third period. And so to nip it in the butt as soon as possible would be to get the referral done, but at a high school setting, there's a lot of those type of referrals. And
Right,
so
well, and that's
we
my point.
understand the reasonable time, and that's why we were trying to figure out a number or a time frame that, hey, it should get handled, so that way.
Should be
it would-
addressed.
Would go less.
Absolutely. What I'm saying though is, to your point, there are a lot of these kinds of things. There are level, think of it, level 1, 2, and 3, right? So what's reasonable in that circumstance is if we had to respond to every referral within 24 hours, then those 3 levels are now all combined. They all carry the same weight. And so what's reasonable would be those lower priority referrals may take a week,
I think
right? The higher priority referrals have got to be dealt with within 24 hours, within 2 hours.
So, but here's the issue. And when you're trying to address and do anything that is a positive behavior modification, it holds 0 water if it takes too long to implement. It doesn't change the behavior and it creates false consequences to something. And so the teacher isn't supported in that situation. So the idea is that the sooner and the swifter something happens, the more it is known, and that there is a 0 tolerance of this, and we need you in the classroom to learn. Okay, so but to kind of say that it could take a week, 2 weeks to deal with it, then almost says we're okay with you coming in late and disturbing learning.
2 weeks later.
Implicitly it does.
It's within a reasonable time frame, and that those time frames may fluctuate based upon the volume of the issues that we're dealing with.
So even for that attendance thing, if you are writing a referral for the 4th unexcused tardy, if it's being handled that late and it's consistently happening, first of all, depending upon if they're 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, you have to stop. The door's locked, so you have to go open the door. Now you have to tell the student everything that everybody else has been doing for the last 10 minutes. So that's a daily disruption to instruction. But by the time it's handled, they've already hit 2 more 4th targets. So now you have 3 referrals for the one that you first had written, and at the same time, all that time, nothing's being handled.
And I
She
think-
loses her status of authority, and
Mhm.
then other behaviors may escalate.
Oh, they do.
because Nothing happens when Miss Taylor writes a referral.
Well, and I don't think that we disagree with you that discipline should be timely. I think it just goes back to what do we feel that we could commit to in a way that we can be accountable and, meet the requirements of the contract. So I think what I hear you say is that you said 24 hours, we've said that's not possible. You've said, okay, tell us what is possible. But reasonable is not something that you're comfortable accepting.
Reasonable is not right.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe that's something we could talk more about internally.
Yeah, because what
But
we
but
don't want,
disagree that there are
Right.
things that happen and that,
and what
employee discipline is the same way, right? If you get further and further away from the incident.
And what we don't want to have happen is kind of this, what we don't want to have happen is kind of like this idea that we would counter with, well, it's best for kids to go ahead and get immediate feedback on referrals, because then that becomes that what's best for kid comment
Understood,
part.
understood.
So I think trying to figure out what it looks like is the most important, because we also have instances where the high school did not go ahead and enforce any plagiarism. So now kids think it's okay to copy and paste. And that was an email sent by administration, do not file referrals on this. So if we're going to be having what is, in order to support the learning in the classroom, these need to be quickly handled so that they do not become habitual behaviors. And that's what we're asking. That's why we're saying what 2 working days would be.
So when you
Right,
say address,
Exactly.
okay,
And that was the point that I was trying to get to as well. Because we thought or interpreted the language that you proposed, address, we interpreted that as addressing the referral, resolving it, closing it out, whatever, within 24 hours.
Mhm.
And now, so what exactly do you mean when you say address the referral? Is that addressing the behavior from the administration? What does that exactly mean?
That the process of whatever this incident has occurred has started. So for example, in Benny's, he's already
Open
got
up
a
the referral
process.
and read it and start the process.
And call the student down, start to address it,
I
whatever.
mean, when
it
you're
is that
sitting
your
with
internal
a queue of
process is.
120 referrals for attendance, and we're trying really hard to get through it, I mean, it's a problem. Especially if the kids are consistently tardy. Because what are they doing when they're tardy? Right, they're getting in trouble in the hallway.
And they're not learning.
Right.
So from
Right,
an addressing
right.
standpoint, are you saying if you were to receive a response that said,
I've received.
I've received this and we're working on it, is that
Address.
considered address?
It has to be addressed with the student, meaning the
Okay.
process has to
The
start
student is
with
full.
the student.
Okay,
So whether there's a consequence
Right.
given or something, the student is at least pulled and there's recognition of, here's the referral. There's going to be some natural consequence that takes place based off of your choices.
So you're saying every referral?
Hmm?
Attendance, discipline, whatever, any referral has to be addressed within 24 hours.
Well,
Or whatever.
whatever, right?
well, in my classroom, I don't, right. But here's the thing, in my classroom, I don't delineate behaviors as to what's lowest level highest. They're dealt with right then and there, which creates consistency in my room. And so that's part of what,
But then we have, as I said, we got a fight today, right now, this morning, and we're dealing with 6 students that got in a fight in school.
Mhm.
And I've got my attendance, I've all been working on that. We have the referrals from the day before, sitting in queue. Now we have to deal with these 6 kids that got into the fight. We're Baker Act, we're giving them civil citations, we're calling parents, we're suspending them. So my whole staff is doing that. So now we still have to get to all these parties and referrals that you're saying within 24 hours.
And
That's
that's
what we
why,
requested.
well, that's why we
But
feel
that's what I'm
like,
saying, address. Now I
what's
have to go
reasonable?
get 50 other kids and try to get them down, but I'm dealing with, right, 6 kids with fights, witnesses, doing all this work. So there has to be reasonable, that 24 hours.
I want to say Casey's really picked up on what collective bargaining is here. We proposed 24 hours. You've made counter arguments about reasonable, and we've said, come back. I mean, she's really elucidated it all really well. So yeah, we're entertaining. Yeah. You know, if you're saying for attendance, we need 72, make that counter proposal, you know?
so, yeah.
I'm not a principal.
We're pushed to clear on this.
Right.
All right. And in terms of what we're willing to agree to, I think that's where we stand, where we have some more discussion that needs to take place. We'll take this back and consider what language we would be comfortable with committing to.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I was part of the committee that talks about student discipline, I want to add to what Martina says. If you want to cut down on the number of referrals, handle the smoke before it becomes a fire, right? If we handle the attendance issues and we get the kids in their seats, we're gonna have less overall problems. I'm not saying it would have avoided a big fight like that, but we've got to find a way to handle the little stuff, because little stuff becomes big stuff. And this is what the teachers are arguing about. We need the assistance and we need the backups for the little stuff as much as the big stuff, because we're trying to avoid the big stuff from happening. If there's an issue in my classroom, I deal with it immediately. If I have to stop instruction and call a parent right then and there, I do it, because I am trying to avoid a bigger problem from happening. That's what keeps kids in their seats and maximizes our instructional time. That's what we're fighting for here. That's what we're asking for here. I get that it is a big lift for you, but I always say, if we can agree to do this, then later we can come up with more creative ways for you guys to be able to handle your workload. I get it. I get that there's more on you having, oh, now we got to fight, so now I got to push this down on the queue. Well, maybe you call the district and ask them to send somebody to handle the attendance issues so you can handle the more serious stuff. We're not supposed to solve that part of the problem for you. We're saying we want to cause you less problems by handling the smaller smoke. And I'm very passionate about this, as you can see, because if we handle it, especially in the elementary levels, guess what? Your job's going to be easier.
So I don't think we're saying we're not passionate about, I agree. I think what we're saying is we don't want to agree to something that we can't
So let's
sustain.
fail, let's agree and fail
So-
wonderfully and figure out a creative way to solve the problem.
if you are actively addressing things, why would we cause a problem for you if you are actively addressing it and working with us on the problem?
I think we just need to have some internal discussion. We can have some more
Joe
discussion.
is in the back.
Gotcha. Joe's got a comment.
So I think part of this, so what y'all have basically said is communication. Right? Because the scenario he gave about the fight is a real. Okay? When you have a melee, and many times it's a melee, it's become a legal issue. Parents going crazy, they bring a turn. And no, that's not to say, I'm not discounting what you said. What I'm saying is that I think you have the right to come to me and say, hey, I turned in this other thing. How come you haven't processed? And I immediately tell them, this is exactly what's going on. Now, a lot of times, my teachers are very aware that I may be handling more than one issue at a time and say, I promise you I'll get back to you on that. Now, as far as somebody having 120 in the queue, that's a side issue. Yeah, that, you know, I mean, you know, but also, now we are missing one other factor with the attendance. So like, especially on the high school level, we don't have the attendance bill. Okay, the attendance bill was kind of like a hammer that brought people in, but technically it's not even legal. You know, if you look at the statute, it's really not legal. And I love it because it helps kids come back, because it's not just, you know, you can't just wait on the DMV to be helping get kids back in school. You know, so I don't know, I agree, but we do need to say that you guys should be able to appeal, come to us without there being repercussion because you even asked, right? Because you want to know, like, hey, look, I followed the process, I haven't got a response immediately, and we should be okay with that. And I should be able to say, here's exactly what we got going on. When these are handled, you are my next thing, and then we need to uphold that if that doesn't happen.
And I do want to go a step further because I do get, I get. And at my school, I do one-time warning for tardy. Next time, I'm calling your mom or sending you home. Don't beat me up. I'm saying that out loud. I know, I get it. However, it has cut down tardies a whole lot. I get it. So I get that side of it. If you talk to any of my teachers, that's the way NIMS operate. And so I get on there, you have 2 minutes, and it's a stampede trying to get to class. But I think there's some things I think we can talk about.
That's the creativity
I
that
get
I
it.
said, if you force the rule.
And
then
that's why I'm saying
creativity
it out loud.
happens.
I'm saying it out loud so that we can.
Can you share that with your other principals?
And that's
maybe
a
they do the same
side.
thing?
I know that's NIM, but I think we can discuss it. I'm not.
And it goes to, it may be an equitable way to approach this instead of an equal way
Correct.
to approach
Because
it.
that might look different on the elementary. I don't know. I'm not an
Correct.
elementary principal, so I don't, I can't speak for that. And then high school,
Correct.
that might look different, but I know what works for me, and I can only bring what we do to the table and then let other people discuss that.
And to your point about equitable between elementary, middle, and high, once a behavior is established, for example, with the talk about trying to push into the younger grade levels for the ESE and all those services and stuff, the same thing with this one. If you deal with it at an earlier age and set an expectation, and you have a consistent expectation through the system, then the expectation is known. It's not changing from site to site, place to place. It is a consistency issue. It is a natural consequence that happens based off of choices. Now, whatever systems and supports around that to help reinforce those, that to make it more equitable, that's where you get your equitable system from. You don't alter the system itself. It's the supports you give that make students successful within it. So that's why we're saying, we're just asking for apples system. And so to some of the other things that were a part of that language.
I'm not finished going through this.
You're not finished with that one? Go ahead. I thought there was, I mean, it was about an hour, so I figured we were.
I have one more to talk about. So, yeah, but that was just referrals. You know, our point is that when writing referrals, they won't be written under another person's name. Okay. D, the teacher of record shall have access to their assigned students' disciplinary information in the student information system for the current school year. Okay, that's something that we can make happen. It will not include prior year's information because we feel like that is another equity issue that is not a place that we're willing to go.
And so to counter to that, and just as a, are we saying then we're not going to give grades for previous years because academic history leads to instructional decision-making? Behavior history leads to where the student may sit, where how we go ahead and support them. So academics and behavior are very similar in that situation of having a holistic look of the student. It is not meant to be, I think we think of, and unfortunately, sometimes it's the worst actors in something, not what is reasonable and fair for the instructor in the classroom. An example we were talking about at lunch was, if I know that a student has been referred for 4 times for cheating on a test or cheating period, I'm going to approach that student differently in where maybe they sit in that classroom, how we go ahead and implement during a testing situation. So that information is just as important as what their test scores on an FSA or something, a fast test now, and other things like that, because you can't make decisions without past history information on a lot of the kids. And so that's where.
There's a whole nother thought of the predetermined behavior. A whole nother genre.
Well, there's predetermined on grades and stuff too, but when those kids come in, we come in and we say, it doesn't matter what happens in your previous classes, you can be an A student in this group. So when you have a student like that, the idea behind this, and this may be more of what training goes into all this stuff, is that, always try to identify those kids and say, you got superpowers. It's time to use them for good, not bad. Like you're a great kid. This is how you can go ahead and be a leader in the classroom. Not a leader going that way, but a leader going this way. And if you have that information, you can talk to those kids in that particular way, not bringing up the past, but you can coach them up. And so I understand that's where I'm talking about. We're sometimes thinking of bad actors, not what everybody could be using that for. And that may be how we message it to our instructional staff, how we train our instructional staff.
Yeah, so we're.
Just to add, thank you, kind of to what Scott said about how we use historical data to determine the supports that the kid needs. If we're thinking about behavior in terms of the MTSS process, sort of more that EFC side of things, if a school team for that current year can access historical records, the teacher could see, okay, well, Susie had this issue all of last year. I need to immediately go see my MTSS team because that same thing came up, and this kid doesn't have an FBA yet. This kid doesn't have a BIP yet. This kid doesn't have behavioral supports yet. I need to urgently take this kid to my team because we're seeing a pattern and we need to give the student the supports that they need, which if a teacher wouldn't have that information, that process can get delayed and delayed and delayed, and while they're getting to know the student in that classroom. So I think that in terms of the MTSS process is an important angle that I think we need to consider in this discussion. And that would help the child be more successful and help the students and the teacher and just create a safer environment, right? If we're having students with dangerous behaviors that have happened previously, that's a consideration too.
And if you find teachers that are not acting professionally with that information, then you deal with that case by case.
Yeah, and train them.
Lasers, not shotguns.
Can I ask why on C, the modified was taken out?
I have a note to add that back in.
I know, but I just want to know the reasoning of why.
On what?
1005C.
D, referral shall not be written under another employee's name or modified by the, so what we're saying is that they can be written and modified as long as they're not done so in a way that lays out that you're doing under that other person's name. I mean, if I modify it and put my name to it, then
So I gave this analogy. So there's some times that, yes, a student display a behavior in class that you write a referral. They come upstairs and they display more behavior, throwing stuff around the room, whatever the case may be. Instead of starting another referral, a lot of times in focus, we will add on the next verbiage of things that has happened and transpired after that. So that is something that we have been practicing now.
Mhm.
So Benny went in the classroom and I threw a book at another kid. I got upstairs and I threw a book at Mr. Sims. Then I wrote that also in the documentation. What that language is, if I can't modify it, then we're saying we have to write 9 referrals for every incident that Johnny has done. Does that make sense?
Understood, which is why I think we've got to.
Not contact the instructor on record. If you wrote the referral, modify,
But you will see
change,
it.
Yeah.
If it's in the same
whatever
document.
If
the
it's
case
in
may
the
be.
same document.
I've got-
because
I
you
got
wrote
It
the
doesn't
referral,
pop up.
you will see, it won't pop up, it's not alert.
Possible.
But if you go back into the referral,
Mhm.
it does say that this is entered by Dr. Bolden, but you will be able to see all of the other things that have transpired.
People in timestamps.
Right, right.
So I think we're okay. We'll have something for that as
Okay,
far as
okay.
counter. Can we take 15 minutes to counter on this and then we'll go from there? 15, hard 15, hard 15.
Because we're getting up to, we're within an hour of our end date.
Stopwatch.
We had to do it.
So we'll see if I got an email.
Oh, you are time managers today.
Stopwatch.
Right, I'm gonna
I'll-
set an
I'll double
alarm
check.
on my phone.
But the policy is gonna turn you down.
Boom. Got it, right
Every
here.
3 hours. There should be a notification attached.
I got it. Get out of here.
So
Not really back. What do you-
I didn't see really-
what do you say? Try me up for that. Tell me what-
So we're on discipline, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a real quick reference to 10.02. When we had put C in for the derogatory materials, we're not asking for that language to be in, but we just want it to be known that if something does go in that does not meet just cause as a comment within the evaluation system, since it does impact performance pay issues, that it could lead to discipline that could then be a lower rating, that it does need to meet just cause. And if something like that happens, we'll follow it to the extent that we have to, unlike this last year. So we're just saying, we don't need the language because we know that any comment has to meet just cause.
If it comes to.
If it comes to discipline. If it goes to discipline, it has to meet just cause, which is what it is. So,
Yeah, if it goes to discipline, but what happened last year was not discipline, so.
so meaning that if there's a comment that is untruthful, that then begins the next step of corrective action, that next step now doesn't meet just cause based off the original comment that was used to create the next action, and therefore it would, so, yeah. So on to the other portion of 10.05. In terms of the strike through, in keeping with the guidelines, an employee may impose customary classroom discipline where necessary. We're okay with the deletion necessarily there. In the portion of the next sentence, in accordance with state law, because we want to make sure state law is followed, we're accepting state law.
Thank you.
And so, which brings us to the next one, which is A. A in our was using focus. So we would like to, rather than say focus shall be the platform, that student discipline shall be documented in a district-wide approved system. And for the 22-23 school year, it is focus.
So this is your B in your
So
proposal,
this is-
right? Is it, what is it theirs?
It's our A in our counter, in our original proposal. It's not in there.
They
So it would
just
be,
deleted it.
I see.
you just deleted it. And so we're saying we want a centralized system that has all that information in it.
On that point.
Mhm.
Why do you feel like that needs to be in the contract?
Okay, so the reason for it being in the contract is
Hold
for
on,
this.
I'm sorry, can we change that to say, would you have concerns if it was in policy and not in the contract?
I would say as a
Yes.
general rule of thumb, I have no influence over policy, so I
But if
want.
it was,
Contracts where we want.
okay,
So that's
then go
to
ahead,
answer.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, it's fine. But the reason for that is for the very reason of having a centralized place where everyone knows where to go. We're all speaking the same language. I mean, and when a student transfers from one school to the next and
There's a
an
record.
administrator receives them, they're getting the information that they should be receiving about that student.
And so, and
As
what's
well
the,
as class
and what's
teachers.
the reason for it again? I mean, is there some other information system that's being utilized?
Yes.
What is it?
Paper, pencil.
Okay.
Shari
Made that
School
joke about
uses
chisels
a
last
red
time.
or yellow paper. And that's what they hand. And then the administrator goes in and writes a referral.
So, and what we're saying is, if you end up using a little slip of paper to get the student to go to the office, that's fine, but the teacher of record that afternoon should put it within focus if they're the observer of that observation piece. What happens if bargaining stays at bargaining? All right. So,
But what I said earlier was, if I have a piece of paper and somebody comes to my door,
mhm.
that's the beginning of it getting addressed.
So now we're gonna go on to the B part, the RB, your A. And we will go with instructional personnel may take the following actions, colon. And in accordance with district policy and any school-specific behavior management guidelines is crossed out. Because if we put policy in there, which is less than the contract, then we undermine our contract. See, statute, contract, policy. So, next piece was, and it makes a shorter sentence.
Trump's policy. Yes, that is true.
Yes. When it comes to number 1 through 8, which we had, since we've accepted your in accordance with state law, we're asking you to accept our state law, which is 1 through 8, which is state statute. In the original proposal that we had, which was establish classroom rules and conduct, establish and implement consequences, assist in enforcing rules, request and receive information, all of those 1 through 8. Because we do agree state law should be followed.
So what's the hesitation to include state law of the district? Because you actively pulled those and left some state laws in.
Repeat that.
Can you show?
Yeah, we are 10.05.
Is your contention that 1 through 8 is outlined clearly in statute, 1 through 8? Like you pulled it, you copied and pasted it.
Yes, sir.
From what statutory provision?
I'd have to go look it up because
It's a Google search, but we'll get it. for you.
I would say just, yeah, exactly. Google one of those complete sentences, it'll pull up the statute.
So we plagiarized. I'm just playing.
Ah,
I'm sorry.
I have cited my source.
You don't write referrals.
Benny, doctor to doctor, that's not cool. We don't talk about plagiarism and jokes like that, all right? I got 30 citations. if you guys cite my stuff. Don't play.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
So the bottom line on it is.
1003.32.
So what is it?
1003.32.
The reason we put in accordance with state law up there was just to make it clear, when you're talking about the use of force, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter whether it's a teacher at school or any one of us as a citizen out there. You can only use as much force as is necessary to
Correct.
protect yourself. And under state law, and state law to me covers state statute, administrative law, as well as case law. That's why we use state law, just to make clear that there are laws, so to speak, and there's case law and everything that governs the use of force. So that's why when I think Chris asked the question,
Yeah.
why we put that in there, it was just to make it
Well,
clear.
I asked why you took out the other sub-articles that are in statute, because our proposal had 8. It was 10.05B, 1 through 8, and you have 1 through 4, which are like kind of piecemealed of 1 through 8, but 1 through 8 is just the statute.
Okay,
Well,
so
My question was why remove any?
I mean, I can speak to 7 and 8.
Sure.
7, I don't really know what press charges mean. From a legal sense, pressing charges, I mean, you can file a complaint with the police, but ultimately it's the state attorney who determines
correct.
whether charges are filed
Okay,
against
that
them.
is
That's
fair.
number
But
one.
if
So
it-
I don't know if that really belongs in here.
So if a kid spits in your face, we're saying you have a right to call the police and have them arrested for battery. Let me be clear about that.
That's a
that's
felony.
established in statute.
Right, so then you wouldn't have a problem putting it in here, so we can.
So our point is this, there's some things that we're willing to clarify in contract, but all of this is in statute. So there's no reason to put any of it in the contract. The only reason we've given in on the 4 that we have is because we feel like it's important to clarify the teacher's role in the classroom within the contract because of the context of the contract and the interaction.
Let me ask you a quick question. So you're at a football game.
Yep.
And you're a teacher on duty or whatever at the football game.
Mhm.
And under the bleachers, you see one kid punch another.
Yeah.
Just freaking punch.
Yeah.
Excuse the language. And do you feel,
It was a bad punch.
do you feel if you don't have this language in here, you cannot file a complaint with the police?
No, we are saying that we want to make it clear to teachers who usually don't pour through Florida state statutes, they may read their contract though, what they are entitled and allowed to do. And I think to Brett's point is that if we are fine with all of this and you have 2,000 employees who we represent saying this is what they want, and to your point, you can do it and have no effect on the district, why would you say no to them when you could do it? And they'd be like, great, they did they gave us the exact language we asked. It seems like an easy win. What is it? You're stealing victory from the jaws of defeat on this one to me. It's like, I don't get that. That's what I was
All right,
saying.
number 8 now. Number 8,
Go on.
you're using the word reasonable. I ask you, what does
It's a
reasonable
statute,
mean?
yeah. Well,
It's according.
I
to
could have
state law.
edited it, but we just
I
make
know
it
what
easy,
we,
copy
I
and
know
paste
what
it,
we,
yeah.
but it's already addressed in the big paragraph up above. Employees may use such force as is necessary. That's basically reasonable as is necessary in protection from attack or to prevent injury. to
We
another
modify our counter to be 1 through 7.
And 7 will change the press charges to file charges. You're right
All
about
right,
that.
can
It's
you-
up to the
okay.
judge.
No, you cannot.
You know I
file
could use
charges
corporal
on it.
punishment?
Only the state attorney can file charges.
I mean, we are telling them, call the police, have them arrested for the crime. Okay, how you want to define that
Report,
legally?
I mean,
If the
report.
police
That exceeds the
choose
police
to,
report, doesn't it? I mean, it's an arrest record now. Yeah, if the
if the
police, yeah.
police choose to move forward, right, which again is
I
not
don't even think
something.
we
Yeah,
need,
it's not
I'd be hard pressed to put something that would bind it.
So,
But I'm saying,
okay,
if we put in their press charges, that would
So
assume
Will,
that they're at our discretion.
Well, to your point, this statute actually makes no sense because a random person can't press charges.
Say that again.
Like the statute says a teacher can press charges, and you're saying, well, that statute's kind of bunk because none of us can press charges.
I'm saying pressing charges is basically, people have the wrong impression that if they file a complaint, then the case is going to move through the system and the
Sure.
state attorney is going to file
Right.
charges.
Right.
So pressing charges, again, it basically means file a complaint or report a crime, file a
Okay.
complaint with the police.
So-
And then it's up to the state attorney to determine whether they're going to file charges.
Sure.
So report a crime may have been committed on school property during school sponsored. Would that be if someone wanted to report a crime may have happened?
I'm just asking, what prevents that someone from doing it without any language in there to that?
They don't know they can.
No, not only that, but
why would
Not a
we
training.
process a grievance over something that they inherently have a right?
You
per
want us to
state statute?
train our teachers on the state statutes? I'll be glad to.
hold on,
Open
hold on.
Yeah, you
I-
are.
I
You just
will,
did.
I will say that we have had our phone calls about this where they've been advised by their site administrator not to press charges and something where they have the right to at least report that something has taken place. So,
Because
This-
this is where this is coming from.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So-
By all means, did you bring it to us and talk to us about that specific situation?
That specific situation? No, because people are scared, their annual contract, they didn't want to come forward.
They directly tell us sometimes. you
They
know,
just
I
go,
don't want my name.
Because
Well,
once it
then
becomes
you-
the site,
you're-
then it's
then
known
yes,
who the
you're free-
person
You're
is.
free to train your staff members on what
Right.
is involved in state statute.
So there's
I have a
counters
question.
are there wherever you want. Yeah.
So would you consider the rules of the district school board to be district policy?
Yes.
Okay, because the statute says that
Correct.
subject to law and the rules of the district school board.
Mhm.
Blah, 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 blah. So I would think that adding district policy would be even more
Correct.
appropriate because that's what the statute says.
Correct.
That is in 1003.32, you're saying, as like a header?
That's the first sentence.
Right.
Subject to the law and the rules of the district school board, that any teacher or member of staff shall have such authority as may be assigned to him or her by the principal or the principal's designated representative, and shall keep good order in the classroom and in other places in which he or she is assigned to be in charge of students. And it must be in accordance within the framework of the district school board's code of student conduct.
And then what does the next sentence say?
But then it goes into what was in your.
It says like teacher shall be able to.
Shall
It
have the
says
authority to
teachers
undertake.
Shall have the authority to undertake. any
Okay,
of the
so that's
following.
why now we're separate from school board. It's saying Florida statute, whatever your policy, need to comply with the next part of what teacher shall be able to do.
But
Right.
it says that they
So-
shall be in accordance with this section and within the framework of the district school board's code of student conduct.
So your district can make up a policy that says reasonable force is defined as no physical force. That only words, verbal force is reasonable. And so a kid could deck you in the face and you can't even defend yourself. And is your contention that that would be a legal policy?
I'm just saying that that's what this statute says.
Yeah, I'm saying the
Yes.
way I'm interpreting it is that the second sentence now, though,
It's the
your
same
board
sentence.
policy needs to comply with all of those enumerated items. And if not, how are you abiding? Because why would they make these enumerated 8 items if it was up to you? That makes no sense.
Why would they put in there in accordance with this section and within the framework of the district school board's code of student conduct, comma,
Sure.
teachers and other instructional personnel shall have the authority to take any of the following, blah, blah, blah. So they clearly
The-
couched it inside the framework of the district school board.
Correct. The board's authority
Right.
is the legislative body for the district.
Right.
As long as it is not prohibited by state statute, usually, in most instances, they have the authority to approve or not approve something, such as, an example would be corporal punishment.
Which is also.
That is
mentioned in
allowed
the
in state statute. However, our board has decided that Leon County, we will not enforce corporal
Right.
punishment.
And
So the authority that we feel the board has as it relates to the policy, there is a student discipline policy along with others that are related to some of the things that you all are proposing. We understand that you all are the ones in the classrooms and you should have a voice in making sure that these things are enforced. We just want to make sure that we are granting them the authority that they have as the board as well, and the authority that we have sitting on this side to be able to manage things in accordance to the way they are supposed to be managed.
And to Wallace's point, corporal punishment is subsection K, if that's. a
yeah,
list.
so I love this example. So there's actually a national movement to make this illegal in all states to remove corporal punishment. So let's say, because I actually serve districts that just make it still, literally.
Yes.
So, so let's say that that's successful, it is removed, okay? So there's not new language in there restricting it, it's just not there anymore. According to what you just said, because it's not directly outlined, you can create a board policy that says we're still gonna institute.
No,
corporal
not if
punishment.
state statute
It's
makes
not
it
prohibiting it.
illegal,
It's
prohibits
not
it.
making it, it's not prohibiting it, it's just removing that language so that it doesn't speak to corporal
Well, if it
punishment
doesn't
anymore.
speak to it,
That, right, so that, okay, so it doesn't speak, you know, how many millions of things does it not speak to? You're saying, well, you can do it as long as it's not outright saying you can't do this. So we can lock a kid in the closet, doesn't say you can't do that. Is that in the statute somewhere?
Well, we
Couched
have
under another
seclusion,
statute?
like,
I mean,
that could be
it's like
false
real.
imprisonment, which is in the
Right,
statute.
exactly.
But again, in the absence of that corporal punishment language, not restricting it, just it's gone. You believe you could pass a school board policy saying we can implement corporal punishment. Is that correct?
As long as it doesn't conflict with any other state law.
We're open to all
We're
counts.
happy to consider your count.
Yeah.
We're happy to consider your count.
Okay,
So we're not gonna
Cameras.
institute corporal punishment.
But it's the philosophical argument.
I think
Yeah.
established is important because some of our classrooms at the higher level high school that become microcosms of construction, culinary,
have to have their own rule set within there. So established would be important for those dangers, like, band room, no one should be hitting each other with drumsticks, things that wouldn't be outlined in a code of conduct necessarily, because they're specific to that site, right? Nobody should be stabbing each other with knives in the culinary room. That's established in those classrooms. And so established over implement in A to 1 on our end would be important, because established gives that bit of discretion to help set your own rules depending on the nature of that environment.
That goes to now RC, which is student discipline shall be addressed by site administrators within 2 working days.
Yeah, B.
Well, it's
Their B, but ours.
It's RC.
Right.
Because we added back the focus part. In D, it would be referrals. Make sure I get this because there was a lot of talk. Referrals shall not be written or modified under an employee's name without notation and notification. Whether that's a digital notification of an updated or whatever, but it would just timestamp it and notify the teacher that something had been modified or what the resolution of the. Right. So referrals shall not be written or modified under an employee's name without notation and notification.
So when you say notification, I need to email the teacher and say I made some changes? Or you saying they can go in there and see that Dr. Bolden has added some? I'd say Dr. Bolden and I put some verbiage.
Yeah.
Until you process the referral and hit submit on it, our end, we're not notified. So like if you were to process that referral, make changes, and I would get on notification on mine that says referrals processed. But now if you did that and then didn't process that referral, finish it out, close it out, then yes, there would have to be another notification outside of that. I don't know what happens if you don't process the referral, where it goes into cyberspace. But
Sits in that queue
yeah, hypothetically.
until they delete it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So
The automatic kicks it back out.
that was D. Yeah, so there's another one that's also we had where it said in our referrals, or our E is instructional staff shall have access to focus for the purpose of writing referrals. There are still individuals like our OTs and SLPs that if they witness something with a student, they can't write the referrals. Well,
No, they
I'm
can't.
telling you right now,
We just
they
looked.
look. So if
You
it's,
can go into focus, go to referrals.
We
and
just,
Pull up the kids, there's a way to do it. That everyone can see it in focus.
Well, if there's at least a training video that we could see on how to do it, I think the folks over here that think that they can't would appreciate that.
Yeah. And I have admin status too, but I still cannot write and referral, and I just have them show me, I can view them. So I'm able to see that and access that for my students, but I still I've never had the ability to actually write a referral myself in focus. And I double checked with an OT today, and the last time she needed to try to write a referral was a couple years ago, but she did not, it was in focus. She did not have that option for herself. She had to type it up, send it to her, the AP, and the AP put it into focus.
And just so that we know,
17 minutes.
and so the last one, F, was referrals shall not be deleted.
Shall not be what?
Deleted.
We don't have an F, but yeah.
We, as we were
add.
talking, part of our, the idea behind and more explicitly on the original language that we gave about shall not be written in another teacher's name was the fact that sometimes they go away. And if a teacher sees it as an issue of behavior, then if it's resolved as to no finding, then that's just what you put in. You don't delete it. You just, whatever the determination was.
So one of the things that we do in my program is, and this is teacher input as well, if a kid takes a situation to trial, we don't get past mediation, it goes to the court. If in fact, the judge ruled in that scenario, there was no fault of the child or whatever, we expunge the record, which means we delete the referral. Parents absolutely love it as well.
Mhm.
I haven't ran into a case yet that we have expunged referral, but this will then stop that from happening. And that is real world, because if they go to court and a judge do that, they doesn't.
It's one time,
It's just one.
one time.
Right. It's
In the
not
state of
just
Florida,
me
it's
and they're
once.
Deleting referrals, it will be a process.
And they have a process.
Right,
They have to be convicted
correct,
and they have to go through the process
correct.
and then it's deleted.
And then it's deleted, but the teacher is
But-
aware.
But
parents are
still,
aware.
certain levels of government still could see it.
After you expunge it,
Correct.
Sealed.
Well, that's some wording we could
Okay, so-
have.
Yeah, and I
The
think
key
there's
intent
something
is-
there, I think in
Yeah.
terms of that, whether it's one of those things where a referral shall not be deleted without notification or whatever process that
I
it
am not
takes, then that's
suggesting
fine.
that you
Alright.
delete referrals. I get your side of it,
Process
but I'm
over
trying to show you.
Yeah, okay.
you know, I have real
That's
world- I'm trying to
So
teach
what-
you
where-
real world scenarios where they, and
They can
they
get
can go to
clean
court
slate.
and it get expunged. And so we do, it is a special program that meets the criteria of what we're talking about. And so if that language is in there, it kind of cripples my program where kids are engaging, and our physical referrals are down because they are.
We could have
Actually
without
involved in
due
the
process.
All right, so, okay, so,
I like, that's a cool program. though.
okay, guys, if we could please. We're happy to consider this. We only have 15 minutes left in this session, and to Chris's earlier comment, he's got to leave at 2:00. So we do have an additional proposal moving forward. It's clarification on our 22-23 compensation proposal. Want to get that on the table, just so it's a basic change to the last time that we spoke, in that there was some discussion about how the 150% rule was applied. We've gone back in, looked at the rules and have applied it in the most beneficial manner. So that has adjusted the numbers a little bit. You know, our number one goal is to get this money in the hands of our teachers, as we have indicated. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the language that we're going back and forth on right now, you know, we can continue to go back and forth on this language and may never agree on how it needs to be done. But the teachers in this district are relying upon us to get this money into their hands. And so I would implore you to consider what we've got to offer here, and let's try and get some movement on this front. All right.
You're really reading into the room in one way that I hear the district, it's really important, the money, but I think the letters of support and the stickers should be telling you that the money is important to the teachers, but the language is also extremely important to them, to the extent that they're willing to wait on the money to get the language.
I don't think all of them are.
I know all of them are not. Okay, but the majority of them, right?
Well, ultimately, I mean, we're not trying to dictate to you what is most important to your.
No, it's what's most important to the district. is what Brett said. No, I address that, yeah. It's most important to the district to get the money in their pockets. And that's what you just said.
I think that's the feeling that we're getting or
Yeah.
hearing from teachers, so.
Are they members?
And there's no,
Probably not.
well, we've got language in place, right? We are working, and the language is as a result of years of back and forth negotiations. Okay, so I mean, we're willing to continue to talk, but you know, quite honestly, there's not an awful lot of movement. You know, to me, you know, just going back to this language, we're not willing to accept the language that you proposed. Okay, and so that may mean that we go back to current contract language, the language that has been proposed and negotiated in years prior, right? Just because we can't come to an agreement on how this is.
And if we
laid
can't,
out.
then we will
Right.
continue to organize and get the folks that have their opinions that they've shared, at least over 1,200 with signatures, the numerous people that wore black that day. the hundreds of people that wore stickers yesterday, all those folks, will continue to let them express themselves on what their concerns are. Because I understand what you're saying is we can go to current contract language, but there needs to be a recognition by the board and by the superintendent that folks are expecting more. They want more, and they want these issues kind of addressed. And so I understand that you're saying that current contract language may be what it goes to from the district standpoint, and that's your choice. That's an option that you guys have. That's perfectly all right. But the folks that are on the ground level, the
Front
ones
line.
that are working there right now, and with the way that things are kind of expressed, that we know these are issues, there are things we need to deal with and stuff. Those are things that they're expecting some relief from, and without relief, they feel that they're not considered respected in what they're doing right now. And there are folks, we've got issues. We have shared issues. Getting people to come into the classroom, getting people to stay in the classroom, a substitute pool that I know that was said that it's like 600 people strong. Every principal I've had a chance to talk to, it is not 600 strong. They're having trouble filling spots. We hear from teachers where paras are pulled from their system to go ahead and cover those areas. So then that creates another void. We've got a lot of things that we have to deal with. I understand that, but they have identified these as priorities. This is what they're asking for. We have, even based on the language that was with the ESC service providers and stuff that we started the day off with, I think we've made some good movement that goes along and shows that we can go ahead and work together on those things. It's just a matter of now we need to kind of address the student discipline piece and a couple of things that go on with the regular classroom stuff. If we don't have a solution, what folks are asking for is what's the plan other than hang tight? Because that's not giving them the understanding that there's going to be relief at some point in time. And so it has to be very strategic on both our parts about what moving forward looks like and what that means to the people that are on those front lines.
Hold on. Scott, we've made a good faith counter to you that was inclusive of a lot of the things that you were asking for.
Right.
The language in 1 through 8 there is included in statute. There's no reason for it to go into the contract. There's absolutely no reason for it to go in the contract. And so what we're saying to you is some of it we're willing to give you. We're not telling you absolutely not, but when we give you a counter and then you come back with exactly with what you originally put in place, well, then that tells me we're at a stalemate. And so we can either, I'm happy to continue down this path, but when we counter and you come back with exactly, that's no movement. So it's either we continue to have movement or we go back to current contract language, because neither of us can impose.
It wasn't exactly the same. It did recognize some of those modifications that you changed. And we were even willing to go ahead and modify some of the things that were even mentioned during the conversation. So to say that there's exactly the same and there's no movement, I don't think that that's
Fair, accurate.
a statement. Yeah.
Okay, well, we could get, okay, that's fair. We'll continue to negotiate the language. So, but the concern is that for, the last time we met was 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
The next time we meet, it will be after August 1st. We've got a deadline
October.
with the state. It'll be after October.
Right.
Yeah, so
It's August, October, right?
I said October.
It's okay. It's okay.
Whatever.
It's okay.
It's okay.
We're moving forward.
October.
We're moving forward. Go.
Nonetheless, there's a deadline for TISA that we're going to have to deal with. So we're trying to get this compensation piece out of the way. We'd like to continue to talk about this language until we're able to get it nailed down, but I don't know that we're, like I said, I don't know that we're even close, because there's some things that we're just not going to give on. They're not. And it sounds like there's some things that you're not going to give on. So we can either agree to meet in the middle and hammer out language, or we're just not going to get anywhere. Right. And so, but what my concern is that while we're beating our heads against each other.
Mhm.
The teachers are out there and they're waiting for this raise and they're not getting it.
And they're waiting
But you
for
realize,
protection.
but you
and
realize
respect.
the raise that they're looking for is not the raise that's here, it's more. So regardless of what we
Okay.
do, they're gonna still want more. So the issue is not necessarily that we're trying to keep money from something or somebody, and I think that's where.
Let's go ahead and talk about what
Yeah.
we're putting on the table.
Sure.
It's, you know, just so, because we only have now at this point, 6 more minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and talk about the offer just to get clarity as to what's on the table. And, you know, put it out there. So option one, like we talked about, so what we've done in this situation is we really took, went back to the 150% rule. Do you have extra copies? Do you pass out?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I passed them around, or she passed them around. Yeah. So under the option one, and really all of this is centered around the same amount of money. It's $6.63 million. Okay, that's what our offer is, $6.63 million. Based upon the rules of TISA, we can go straight 150% rule, right? So if you break it down here, we can get to 46.8 and do a carve out that includes $200,000 to raise the base supplement by 10% and $258,000 for the ESC specialist supplement. And, you know, the teachers above the base will receive $2,082, right?
Because of our discrepancy on the ESC specialist supplement, what are you meaning by that?
Okay, so to fund the second iteration,
So it will double their
1/3.
current supplement.
yes. So basically the supplement percentage will double. So if it's 7, it's 14,
Mhm.
it will
Yeah.
become 14.
I'm asking. for
And then the
language.
third iteration will be 21.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
That's the way it's been costed out. So it's 1/3 increments. All right, so in 1/3 increments, the second iteration costs $258,000. So it's a carve out of $458,000 from the $6.63 million. Doing that will take the base to 46.8. The base group will get $3,123. The teachers above the base will get $2,082. Okay. Option 2 remains the same as it was before. We can get to 47.5, but teachers above the base will only receive $1,800. And option 3 is just a straight, splitting of the money using the 150% rule, no carve out for supplements, no carve out for ESC supplements. And that would result in us getting to 47,028, 3,350 for the base group of teachers, and 2,233 for those teachers above the base. All right. Now, once again, this is open to your interpretation. However, if you want to slice and dice this $6.63 million another way, we're open to hear that. We're just outlining sort of where we're updating you on where we feel like we can get with that $6.63 million based upon our previous conversations.
Any questions or comments about that? Or I say something totally different. I have a counter proposal for you all on evaluations that you're gonna hate because it's current contract language. So that's what our proposal is to that. There's only a handful of states districts that have actually pulled the language through whatever the new law is. FBA finds that law to be unconstitutional because wages and terms and conditions of employment, mandatory subject to bargaining. Orange County did like you did and pulled it. Again, only like 4 of you in the state did. They just lost their ULP that was filed yesterday, and FERC ruled in favor of Orange County, and they're being required to bargain that.
Per ruled in favor of Orange
Of the
County.
union, sorry, of Orange. To me, when I say Orange County, it's the union. But yeah, the Orange County Teachers, Classroom Teachers Association, and they said it's mandatory subject to bargaining. So CCL is good for us, for a ULP, which will probably be the same solution. So we would propose CCL and wait for the year to see what is exactly happening, which Unfortunately, one of my other districts is one of these four that's trying to pull it, but the others are just leaving it. And so, yeah, you're one of the few that's pulling it. Do you have any comments about that? Or, because you must have gotten advice from, I mean, Will or Opal saying you're good to pull it, right? Look that up. How quickly do they, we just got this fresh yesterday from, who did this? I forget which one of FDA staff did it, but yeah, we got it yesterday. Oh, it was Emily, actually.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, by the way, so what he just said is true. Hold on.
So for the evaluations article, you gave us a presentation, right? That was
Well,
on
we
the
struck through language. We didn't strike the entire article.
But it was said it was just a presentation.
Yeah, yeah, it's,
It was based on the new state law. that said
it was a superintendent, yeah.
Right,
exactly.
right. So.
I understand why you did it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying where the, it
Right.
seems like the law is. case
So
law
yeah,
is
we're
decided.
happy to take that into consideration and, you know, we'll counter, once we've had a chance to formulate our position on it. Yeah. So, it's 2:00. We appreciate you guys taking the time today
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me out.
we're hopeful that we can, get together again soon at some point to continue down this path.
Available tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As it
Rexy
relates,
sent it to me and I'll send it to her.
I got it. Well, I don't know if I got it. There it is.
as it relates to to 8 or the language that we proposed is the counter back in 7. Did you guys,
Right.
you guys have?
I did. Through your work email. Yeah.
Have the
that's easiest.
position on that?